man. I've been waiting on this for a really long time. Just playoff basketball in general. You know, a lot of people have been saying, you know, I haven't played any meaningful basketball, and, you know, I'm not ready for that. And, you know, this is my time to prove it. So,
I understand this point. I like Devin Booker a lot. Never saw this coming out of Kentucky, right? It just goes to show you, again, these one-and-done guys, it's hard to say. You got to give them some time, see who's going to pan out. I'm not sure Devin Booker's a winning player. I don't know. I know, like, I can blame it on the Suns, that's true, but he's not a defender at all, and he is a streaky shooter. So it is hard to say whether he is a high-volume scorer on a bad team or whether, as James Harden has done, you can harness his talent in the service of a winning team. He can be a leading scorer on a winning team, a playoff team.
For the first 4 years of his career, Devin Booker was an invisible superstar, a guy on a team who only averaged 22 wins over 4 seasons, and a guy that was the poster boy for empty stats. Booker was more known for his empty stats reputation and being a guy who would score a bunch of points but never win games, and actually being known for how well of an all-around player he really was. I was a guy who was a sixth man in college, a late lottery pick, a guy that was often looked over and forgotten about, all-star sub year after year. Now, one of the best players in the NBA on the best team in the NBA. This is Devin Booker, Empty Stats, a Gene Knows Hoops documentary. Coming out of high school, Devin Booker was a 5-star recruit coming out of Michigan with many high-level schools on his radar. After an astounding freshman year in Michigan, Booker would move to Mississippi to be coached by his father. His father, Melvin Booker, at the time was the assistant at his alma mater of Moss Point. Melvin was a legend at Moss Point. In his senior year, he averaged 28 points and would then go on to get recruited by the University of Missouri. At the University of Missouri, Melvin Booker really wouldn't get any looks and turn any heads until his junior year, where he would start in all 33 games. And he would lead the team to a 24-2 record and an Elite 8 appearance. At the time, Melvin Booker was considered the second best point guard in all of college, only behind a guy named Jason Kidd. Despite Melvin's success that year, he had went undrafted in the 1994 NBA draft, and he wouldn't get his chance to play in the NBA until 1997, where he bounced around multiple teams but never could get anything to stick. Melvin would go play professionally overseas, which would leave Devin with his mother in Michigan, and he would really only see his dad in the summers. Like I said earlier, Devin was a standout his freshman year of high school, and Melvin really wanted the chance to coach his son to make him into the player he knew he could be. With a little bit of convincing to Devin Booker's mother, Melvin was able to have his son come to Mississippi and train with him full time and play for Moss Point.
I spent the first year just recruiting him. I was like a recruiter. You just had to fly to Michigan and try to convince him and his mom, like, the best move for him is to come to Mississippi. And it allowed me to work with him daily. Not just on his physical, but his mental.
Under his dad's coaching at Moss Point, he became an absolute star and would be named a McDonald's All-American. Devin would choose to go to University of Kentucky over his dad's beloved University of Mizzou. He said this was just a better basketball move for him, even though he had a lot of love for the University of Missouri. But Devin Booker would be on a recruiting class that was one of the best recruiting classes college basketball has seen in a decade. The 2014 Kentucky recruiting class was one of the most decorated recruiting classes of all time, and one that I feel like everyone still remembers to this day. It featured 4 ESPN Top 100 players in Karl Anthony Towns, Trey Lyles, Tyler Ulis, and Devin Booker, with Booker being the least covered and the lowest ranked player out of all of them. This year was also different for Kentucky. Kentucky was known to be the one and done factory where players come, they take a year, and they go straight to the NBA. Well, it didn't happen exactly like that this year.
With our freshman class, me, Tyler Ulis, my teammate now, Karl Towns, and Trey Lyles, we went in thinking it's going to be our team. Okay. You know, we're thinking Willie Cauley-Stein's about to leave, the Harrison twins are going to the NBA, so they all decide to stay. We're calling coach, like, how's this gonna work? You know what I'm saying? You know, now we have 10 McDonald's All-Americans on one team.
There's so much talent with this team that Coach Calipari had to institute the platoon system of 5 in, 5 out to give everybody their playing time. Booker, being talented enough to get into the starting lineup, was not able to crack it because of the Harrison twins, and Calipari had stated that he didn't want to break up the twins to put Booker in the starting lineup, so he kept them together, and Booker was forced to the bench as a 6-man role. Off the bench, Booker would showcase his talents in his limited minutes, and he would go on to win the SEC 6-Man of the Year. Kentucky would go undefeated in the regular season and all the way up to the Final Four, where they would end up losing to Wisconsin. And after that loss, a few weeks later, Booker would declare for the NBA draft, which a lot of scouts kind of thought was premature. They were kind of unsure about his game and they saw major red flags. This was a young teenage kid who was mainly a jump shooter at Kentucky and didn't seem like he had an all-around game yet, and they were really worried about how could he transition to the NBA.
Right, we're surrounded by a lot of talent at Kentucky, so I found my niche, and that's what we needed to do. We had plenty of ball handlers out there with Tyler and Andrew, so I feel like I can show a little bit more, create for others, create for my own, and I'm trying to become an elite two-way player.
Despite the concerns, the Phoenix Suns used their 13th overall pick to draft Devin Booker. Booker would be the youngest player drafted that night at 19 years old. At the time, it really didn't feel like it, but Phoenix was the ideal place for Devin Booker, as they were looking for a new star, a new face of the franchise after losing Steve Nash, as he had came to a team with the deepest position being the shooting guard position. Halfway through his rookie year, the Phoenix Suns would fire Jeff Hornacek and hire Earl Watson, Devin Booker's player development coach. And with Earl Watson there, he would give him the starting position, and Booker would average 13.8 points, 2.6 assists, and 2.5 rebounds.
Earl was behind me 100%. People don't know the story behind me and Earl. He was my player development first. So when I wasn't playing as a rookie, we used to spend that extra time in the gym. He was telling me then, you're going to be special. You're going to be really special. And then, Hornacek got fired. He ended up being the head coach, and he was behind me 100%. He said, I think, the quotes are out there. He said, I know you're going to fail. You're a young player in this league, but, we're going to go through you.
He would go on to make all rookie first team, a huge accomplishment for a guy that just a year ago was coming off the bench. But the highlight of his rookie year would come in a game against the Los Angeles Lakers, where he would play against his idol, Kobe Bryant. And after the game, Bryant would sign his shoes and leave a quote on his shoes that he to this day still lives by and has tattooed on him, a be legendary. This would be a message that Devin Booker would use for the rest of his career and anchor him into his sophomore season. Going into his sophomore season, Watson officially gave the keys over to Devin Booker and gave him the whole offense. His second season was really the year that he began to turn the heads and kind of make noise in the league as an elite scorer. He would average 22 points this season and would start in all 78 games he played. But the highlight of this season wasn't a quote from Kobe Bryant. It actually came in a game in March against the Boston Celtics. Devin would do something historic this night. The team was on a 6-game losing streak and had nothing positive really going for them. Through the first half, the Suns were getting blown out by 23 points and Booker only had 19 at the time, and it looked like another regular Suns loss. But in the third quarter, Booker would catch fire. He would score 23 points in the quarter, and the fourth quarter he would follow that up with 28 points and would be the youngest player ever to score 70 points in a game. Although Booker did have 70, they would still go on to lose that game, and the whole narrative of the empty stats kind of seemed like it stemmed from this game, as this was a game that, as fans of the Suns, and the Suns themselves were celebrating as Devin Booker had scored 70 points, but in a losing effort, and the whole stereotype of empty stats of a guy who would score a lot of points but didn't really mean anything would truly begin.
Is it weird to celebrate after a 10-point loss?
It is, because we've all been winners most of our life, but at the same time, the way our season is going right now, we're kind of looking for something to celebrate.
The Suns would struggle the rest of the season and would finish 24-58, and this was also the year that Devin Booker would start to really get his comparisons to his idol and Kobe Bryant. The next two seasons, we would see Booker and the Suns struggle to win more than 20 games, with critics wondering if Devin Booker could be the best player on a winning team. In both years, Booker had a new head coach, a new system, consistent roster changes, and the Suns were just trying to do anything they could to make it work. Booker would make headlines in 2018 where he had proclaimed that this was the last year he was not going to make the playoffs, and a team at the time that was 21-61 and kind of seemed absurd to be said. Devin Booker would double down on that idea and sign a 5-year, $158 million contract extension. 2018-2019, we would see Devin Booker bump up his point total to 26.6 points a game, and he would have 2 50-plus scoring nights, and the games would come back-to-back where he would score 50 and 59 points the next night. But the Suns would still struggle, as Devin would see his fourth coach in 4 years and only win 19 games. And most of the sports world, after these 50-point games, grew even bigger concerns around Devin Booker and the future of the Phoenix Suns.
He's in his fourth season, and look what he hasn't done for Phoenix, because you talked about what happened to Durant and Westbrook, but still, this is 4 years in. They were second worst in the West the first year. They were worst in the West the second year. They were worst overall the third year, why they got the number one pick. And now they're worst in the West again. So since he entered professional basketball, Devin Booker's Phoenix Suns have the overall worst record over 4 years in the league.
The next season would welcome another new head coach for Devin Booker and Monty Williams. And under Williams, the team would begin to change. GM would bring in a much needed ball handler in Ricky Rubio, which would finally give Devin the ability to play off ball and really hone in on his scoring ability. Finally, the Suns saw some type of improvement and would finish 10th in the West at 34-39. And this was like a glimpse for Suns fans that they had seen things changing in their organization, and we're very hopeful for that. This was a sign of things changing and this organization might be able to return to winning basketball. And for Booker, this was really the first year we've seen him kind of break that mold of maybe he's not so much of an empty stat.
Devin Booker is this high volume, high usage scoring guard who really doesn't do anything else. And so by many, including me, we look at him and go, he's overrated. He's putting up flashy numbers, but his team loses, and any good scoring player who shoots a lot will score. No, this year that is not Devin Booker. He's much more efficient, and he's doing that on a team where if he doesn't score 30, you feel like they can't win. He's doing it efficiently, and Stephen A, for a winning team, they're 5-2.
After the best year of his career, heartbreak would strike Devin Booker as his idol and Laker legend Kobe Bryant would suddenly pass away. Devastated by the passing of Kobe, Booker took this opportunity to do what he knew Kobe would want him to do. Be legendary. That year, Devin Booker would finally make his first All-Star game after being snubbed the year prior and be the first Suns to make the game since Steve Nash in 2012. But shortly after him making his first All-Star game, it didn't seem like Devin could catch a break as the whole league had took a halt because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Last night it was the NBA suspending its season after Rudy Gobert of the Utah Jazz tested positive for the coronavirus. The league will use this hiatus to determine the next steps in dealing with the pandemic.
And when the league decided to resume, it was in a completely new format that we've never seen before, a bubble. The league would invite its top 22 teams to play in the bubble with a chance at an NBA championship. And with most of the sports world on a hiatus still, all eyes were on the NBA. And this was Devin Booker's chance to finally cement himself as a star in this league. And he took full advantage.
Steps into the deep three, and why not?
Wow.
And with a nasty left-hand finish. Booker, this is for the win. Got it! Wow!
In 8 seeding games in the bubble, the Suns would go 8-0 with the best record in the bubble. And Devin Booker would be rewarded all bubble first team. And the standout moment would come from his game winner Devin Booker hit over Paul George in the Los Angeles Clippers. This felt like the coming out party for Devin Booker and the Phoenix Suns, as everybody in the league knew now that this team was legit and they were starting to become playoff favorites for a lot of people around the league. That offseason, we would see the Suns make one of the biggest moves they've made in a decade. They would trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder and bring in Chris Paul. This seemed like the missing piece the Suns needed to become a legit contender, but people were still a little skeptical if Chris Paul and Devin Booker can make this work.
When you talk about the big-time teams in the Western Conference, primarily we're talking about the Lakers, the Denver Nuggets, of course, the Clippers. I don't see the Phoenix Suns being able to mess with that.
Chris Paul would not only give Devin Booker an elite playmaking point guard, he would also bring a new swagger to the Phoenix Suns team and a new veteran mindset that the Suns really needed.
I remember we were talking at the beginning of the season and we were talking about the playoffs, and Chris yelled out in the locker room, he was like, 16 teams make the playoffs? That ain't what we're going for. And hearing his energy and his passion behind that statement, I was like, oh yeah, we're on the same page.
Now with Chris Paul on the team, the Suns will have their first winning season in half a decade, finishing at 51-21 in the second best record in the conference, making it to their first playoffs in over a decade. And Devin Booker was able to cash in on that promise. No, it didn't happen immediately, but he told the city of Phoenix that he would make this team a playoff team, and he did. Devin Booker was finally in the playoffs, and he was ready to completely destroy that empty stats narrative. And the first time the Phoenix Suns would match up against the Los Angeles Lakers in a matchup that not many people expected them to win. The Suns would go down 2-1 early in the series and rally back to win the next 3 games, and beat the Lakers in 6. And the next round, they would welcome MVP Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. With the banged up Jamal Murray, the Suns were just too much for the Nuggets, defeating them in 4 games, setting up a matchup with the Los Angeles Clippers in the Western Conference Finals. After another great series, we would see the Suns win in 6 games and make it to their first NBA Finals since 1993. From struggling to get national recognitions in his first years in the NBA to now being on the biggest stage in the world, Devin Booker had made it. And in a hard-fought 6 games, Booker and the Suns would come up short to the Milwaukee Bucks. But the Devin Booker story is far from over. The 25-year-old star has just led his Phoenix Suns to a franchise-best 64 wins, and the future is bright for Phoenix and Devin Booker.
Going from not making the postseason to making a finals run, and just the future that you guys have with so many, young, talented players.
Championship basketball, and nothing less than that.
A kid out of Michigan who went to University of Kentucky, a late lottery pick who had to fight to get playing time in the NBA, to finally becoming a star, to having to prove himself amongst the best of the best. From getting snubbed to be an all-star, to getting labeled an empty stat who couldn't win, has finally made himself known as one of the elite players in the NBA. A guy who's in the MVP conversation. A guy who's looked at to lead the franchise for the next 10 to 15 years. Devin Booker has proven himself at every level he's been. And now a legit star in the NBA, he is no longer an empty stat.